What's going on, everybody? Well, with the release of Justice League this month, it is time to go over my new ranking, my new updated ranking of the DCEU, DC Cinematic Universe, DC movies, whatever the fuck you want to call this thing, because WB doesn't even know what name they want to call it, apparently. The DC films, the 5 that we have so far, we're going to talk about it right now and rank them. So, starting off at the bottom of the list for me, unfortunately, is going to be Suicide Squad. When I saw this in theaters, it was much more fun. It was a lot more energetic. I loved seeing the characters come together. I loved most of the casting for the characters, especially Deadshot and Harley Quinn. Didn't see enough of the Joker to say whether or not. The movie had a lot of problems, but I just had so much fun with it that I really enjoyed it. And had I reviewed it on this channel when it came out, it would have got to see it in theaters. Unfortunately, upon rewatch, God, all of the flaws totally take over this movie upon rewatch. When you don't have that novelty of the first time watch and the excitement of seeing these characters together for the first time, the story, the poor writing, the horrible villain, the poor CGI, just the mess that this movie is just starts to really shine through. And I'll be honest with you, I've rewatched this movie twice since I've owned it on Blu-ray. It's barely watchable to me now. Like, this movie is bad. It's a movie like, mindlessly, I could watch it, I could put it on in the background, I could have fun with it. I still do enjoy most of the character performances. I just feel like they're wasted in this movie. They should be in a much better movie, and it's totally DC's fault for the most part. And I don't think David Ayer necessarily brought his A game to this, but they only gave the guy 6 weeks to write the script for this, and I'm sure he was just rushed and meddled with. Of course, they took his movie, they recut it with a trailer company, so that was another big thing, is like all the music video style, like editing in the first half of this movie just drove me nuts, where every single time somebody's on screen, they have their own classic rock soundtrack and they just start the track at the beginning, and the movie annoys the piss out of me when I watch it now. So it's the only movie so far, and I have to rewatch Justice League, it's the only movie in the DCEU so far that I honestly can't recommend that I do think is a bad movie. So Suicide Squad, unfortunately. Hopefully you do better in your sequels, but that is my number 5. Number 4, and it breaks my heart to say this because I look forward to this movie for so fucking long, is Justice League. I dislike this movie the more I talk about it, the more I think about it. I was kind of lukewarm on it in my review. There was things that I liked about it. There was a lot of things that annoyed me about it, but the more I discuss it, the more I talk about it, the more I let it marinate, the more I think about what should have happened, what could have happened, the movie just really angers me. I still do lean towards the recommending side of this. Upon rewatch, I might change my mind on that, so hold true. Whenever I get the Blu-ray, you might find a different tune that I'm singing, but as of right now, it's the least watchable as far as the ones I can recommend. Just a mess of a movie. I mean, you got a movie that it's made by 2 different directors. You got the Zack Snyder stuff, and then you got the Joss Whedon stuff. The movie flows overall, but you can really see which ones are Zack Snyder, which scenes are Joss Whedon. The movie is overly light and overly comedic to me. It doesn't even feel like it's true to the characters to a degree, especially Batman. Like, the fact that Batman just meets Aquaman and 5 minutes later tells him all of his stories, his identity, like everything about all of his secrets is just off-putting to me. The story of the movie feels so rushed and like choppy because so much got taken out of it. The villain is fucking terrible. Like, I still think he's a better villain than the Enchantress in Suicide Squad, but it's not by much. Like, Steppenwolf is just a lame, boring villain. There was a lot, supposedly, allegedly, that got cut out of his motivations that would have made him a better villain, despite the bad CGI, but he's literally just here to destroy the world because he's a villain. He wants to destroy everything, and that's your villain this time around. Where the movie goes right is it gets a lot of the characters and a lot of the character interactions and relationships right. Like, you get the Flash that you want to see. You get a really good Cyborg. Aquaman's great. Wonder Woman's as great as ever. Batman, to me, was a bit of a downstep from BVS partially because Ben Affleck in the reshoot scenes, you can tell, is just tired of this shit and wants to go, and he kind of phones it in a bit. But they really neuter Batman in this because it makes sense somewhat story-wise when you're dealing with all these metahumans and these superhuman beings. You got the human with all the armor and the technology, and he's basically just reduced to shooting shit. But just the Batman fight scene that we got in the warehouse scene in BVS, we don't get any scenes like that in this movie. There's no really memorable sequence in this. There's no awesome, like, standout action scene. The closest you get is the resurrection of Superman, which even feels kind of half-assed and forced. But the scene is just, it's okay as far as him kind of beating on the Justice League and the Flash running around him and his eyes going and following the Flash. Some of that is fun. Some of the dialogue is fun, despite feeling a little bit forced to be too much like a Marvel movie. The CGI as far as Superman's upper lip with the mustache thing is just horrendous. I don't know, guys. Like, Justice League was just such a big disappointment for me from where this movie should have been, and it's a movie that could possibly end the DCEU as we know it. And we're going to hear something probably by January, end of January, beginning of February. I think we'll hear something definitive about whether or not they're going to continue this universe or not, because this movie is just not making the money that they want. And it's because they didn't make a very good movie. So Justice League, unfortunately, is my number 4. Number 3, and I'm speaking strictly on the Ultimate Edition with this one, is BVS, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. The theatrical edition would probably be my number 4 or something, or maybe even number 6. Like, the theatrical edition of this movie is garbage. I will never watch it again. But the Ultimate Edition of this movie, to me, that's the only version that's out, so that's all I'm going to talk about. It's a much better movie. It flows a lot better. It's more cohesive. What this movie got right, it's got an awesome Batman. I think that it carries over the Superman and it kind of progresses him in a pretty decent direction. It's a little bit too grim, but for the most part, his story progression into this movie is pretty good and it makes sense. His clash with Batman and everything like that makes sense within the context of the story. You get like Wonder Woman, the introduction of her was great. You get a lot of great action scenes. Like the Batman warehouse fight is one of my favorite like action scenes in any superhero movie ever. It's just phenomenal. The fight between Batman and Superman is pretty good. I think that it could have been longer. It could have been a little bit more epic to me. It wasn't the big badass battle that I was hoping that it was. The whole thing about Martha probably ties into that a lot, which I'll get into in a second. But the cinematography, the look, the tone of this movie, it's a very epic, ambitious, grand scale movie. And I think, at least in the Ultimate Edition, most of the things that they go for, they succeed in. Unfortunately, some of the things that they fail in is Lex Luthor, which is the biggest negative of this movie for me. Who the fuck let Jesse Eisenberg do that to Lex Luthor? He's playing the Riddler the whole time. They should be smacked. Like, Jesse Eisenberg, nothing but respect for that guy. He's a great actor, but letting him just take off with the character like that and making such a weird Lex Luthor that just does not gel at all as far as a threat for Batman and Superman. Whatever. Hopefully they fix him, if he even continues on in this universe. They rush into the Death of Superman storyline. I think that Doomsday looks pretty good, but he should have looked a little bit more like the comics. Like when he starts to have the spines and everything out, I feel like he should have morphed at least 1 or 2 more times to be a lot more intimidating than he was as far as the look, but that's a minor nitpick. But it feels shoehorned, it feels rushed in. I don't feel like there's enough Wonder Woman in the movie. I feel like she should have been a little bit more. I think Batman should have had his own standalone movie, so it feels like he should have been in this movie a little bit more, but then the movie, it's already 3 hours long. It just feels like too much stuff get crammed into this movie to try to do a rush job to get so much in place for Justice League, when a lot of the pieces in this movie should have been their own standalone movies. Should have got a Man of Steel 2, should have got a Wonder Woman movie, should have got a Batman movie, and then we can do the BVS movie. But all these things got introduced at once, and the movie just feels very bloated and very crowded. Still a fun watch, still overall a really good movie in my opinion, with a lot of flaws. But it's a movie that each time I rewatch it, I like it just a little bit more. Again, speaking strictly on the Ultimate Edition. And it also plays into the fact that, you know, Zack Snyder really got fucked in this universe because he made Man of Steel, which I'll talk about here in a second. And to me, it's a great movie. A lot of people don't understand it. If they don't like it, fine, but a lot of people don't understand the movie to me. Is why they don't like it, but I feel like that was great. Then they hand him the keys to the franchise. They give him BVS. They make him rush Batman into this movie. They chop his movie all to hell, throw it this little hack job version in theaters, get horrible reviews. Then they put out this director's cut, which is much more of what he intended, which is a much better movie. And then they do the same hack job and the same meddling over on Justice League, so Zack Snyder, you got fucked in this universe, buddy. I'm sorry. But BVS is my number 3. Now, number 2 and number 1 is still the same from my last DC ranking. I've rewatched both of these movies since, and they're so good that it's literally like this. And honestly, some days you might ask me, and I might switch my number 1 and my number 2, but as of recording this right now, my number 2 is still Man of Steel. Now, I love Man of Steel. It's my favorite Superman movie. It's the Superman movie that made me a Superman fan, because I've not been a Superman fan my entire life. I feel like the cinematography, the scope, the epicness of this movie, the ambition, the really human-like story that they give Superman about this alien who's on Earth and has the ideologies and the respects of both fathers and which direction does he want to go. And you get the introduction of General Zod, who's still the best villain that we've had in this DCEU, and just an awesome third act, which a lot of people's gripe is with the third act and so much destruction. But to me, if you got two superhuman beings like on the same level fighting each other, you're gonna have tons of destructions. And to me, the movie just goes there where a lot of movies won't go there. If it was a Marvel style movie, it would be, you know, kind of glossed over, and even though thousands of people died, it doesn't feel like it. This movie kind of makes you live in that devastation. Even up to the scene whenever Zod is about to melt that family and Superman has to make that decision. I like Lois Lane with Amy Adams. I like Perry Mason. All the cast in this movie is great. Even the parents, Russell Crowe as Jor-El, I believe is his name. And then you have Kevin Costner. Just such a great cast. Really good direction to me. Just a really nice, updated, kind of modern take on Superman, and to me it was a great jumping point for this universe. So damn near a flawless film to me. To me, it's a little bit too convoluted and confusing as far as all like the really realistic takes that Zack Snyder has on like how his suit works and why he's able to fly and all this really scientific explanation. The movie gets a little bit bogged down in that, and I think it's a tad too long. The devastation in the third act is great, but it does go on just slightly a little bit too long. But this is nitpicking kind of stuff. But I really do love Man of Steel. That is my number 2. Now, number 1 to me is still Wonder Woman. I think that this movie is still great. I would probably tailor back my rating number that I gave it just a little bit upon rewatch. I don't think the villain was quite as successful as I thought it was, but overall, everything that they did in this movie was what the DCEU needed at the time. And unfortunately, it kind of got squandered in Justice League, but needed a movie where it restored hope, not only as far as the tone, but as far as us fans. You get the character of Diana Prince, who's just this wonderful character, played by Gal Gadot, in a role that or at least nobody believed in this girl, like hardly anybody. You saw the casting of Gal Gadot, or Gal Gadot, however you say her name, and you thought, oh my God, she's terrible. And most of the movies that she had been in up to that point, she has been pretty terrible. But for whatever reason, her charm and her personality is just electrifying when she's Wonder Woman. Like, she is incredible in that role. I think that the action scenes in this movie are great, especially like the scene whenever she's coming up in her armor and she's running towards all the bullets and dodging everything and just restores hope to all the soldiers. I love the storyline about this kind of fish out of water kind of direction that they go, with her going into America and into the world outside of Themyscira, into this world war, and trying to find Ares and her relationship with Chris Pine. And Chris Pine's incredible. So much about this movie just fires on all cylinders and is just a great Wonder Woman movie to me. The only flaw really is partially in the villain. I still think the villain's a lot more successful than most people give it credit for. It's kind of a bait and switch. They make you think one guy's the villain and he's a little bit too hammy. I'm not a big Danny Houston fan, especially when he's a villain. He always is really hammy and just lays it on fucking thick with the cheese. But they swap it out at the end to give you the true Ares. And from that moment till the end, to me, Ares was a pretty successful villain. The way that he was able to kind of manipulate everybody and kind of be behind the scenes, I think all that succeeds pretty well. But to me, Wonder Woman is still a great movie. It's a great origin story. It's now, I think, the top grossing origin story of all time, and it deserves it. It's a great movie. I can't wait to see what they do with the Wonder Woman 2. I think they're still going to keep it kind of back in the olden days. I don't think they're going to bring it into modern times, assuming it still gets made. But Patty Jenkins did phenomenal with this movie. I think it's the best DCEU movie so far. And I think that it's the movie that they need to really try to focus on as far as how to save and kind of salvage the DCEU after the very mixed reception of Justice League. They need to focus on doing Wonder Woman 2 and a Batman movie as soon as possible, as well as a Man of Steel 2. Get everybody's good graces back with those characters. So yeah, I love Wonder Woman. That's my number 1. So what is your guys' ranking of the DCEU, DC Cinematic Universe, DC movies, whatever you want to call it? Put it down below in the comments section, guys. How do you rank these films? Do you love them all? Do you hate them all? There's some mixed feelings here and there. Put all that down below and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to check out my social media links like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, those are all down below in the video description, as well as the link to my Patreon page. Great way to give back to this channel, help the channel grow, and get some awesome content for patron eyes only. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.